Well, we're delighted to have back with us today Bill Gallagher. He heads up, he's the founder and proprietor of TeamWorks. Now, this is a great organization that will come into your organization and work with you and your staff to kind of get on the same page, find out what the differences are in personality, and create the team environment that you're all looking for. There's another part of this. I think those of us who work hard, long days, long hours, how do we separate our professional life and our personal life? And you're a counselor.
Yes.
I'm a lay counselor. Don't call me, call Bill.
Or Patrick.
Or Patrick. But here's the deal. I think it's one of the greatest struggles. How do you turn it all off? And can you turn it off? And should you turn it off? You know, I'm a red, Peggy's a blue.
Yes.
And I have to be very careful that I don't bring a 12-hour day home. I do sometimes.
Well, I think one of the key questions, Perry, when we talk about balancing your personal and professional life, is your busyness a project-oriented busyness, or is it a lifestyle? Now, all careers have seasons where you're very, very busy, and there should be understanding and grace for that from the people that live in your home and your life. But if it's a lifestyle, we have something else to talk about. So balancing your personal and professional life is essential. If you want both areas to be successful, a lot of people that are successful at work, because they're mostly at work and the work obsesses their thinking and keeps them up at night, don't do as well at home. A lot of people that have to be home and there's no flexibility to work overtime or whatever when they need to are going to have problems on the job. So there is a way to balance both, in my opinion.
We're not suggesting here living two lives, are we?
No, I just think it's being effective where God has you, in the workplace and in the home, and I think you can do both.
How do you know if somebody's life is out of balance between home, personal, and professional?
Well, one of the first signs is when family starts to complain. Many years ago, on one of the talk shows here, I interviewed the director of the Addiction Recovery Center, and I'll never forget this discussion, Perry. I asked her, and we're talking about all kinds of addictions, you know, workaholic, alcoholic, pornography, I mean, all kinds of addictions, eating, gambling. And I said, what is your definition of an addiction? And she said, my definition of an addiction is any behavior that negatively starts to impact a person's health or their closest relationships. That was their definition for addiction. So when the family starts noticing that mom or dad or whoever is working too much and not around and irritable when they are around, that's probably the number one sign to be aware of. When you're stressed out, overly stressed out, I have a little cartoon. I do a team building thing on balancing your personal and professional life. And a lady sitting in, it's a cartoon, she's sitting in the doctor's office, and he says, when is the last time you had a stress test? And she said, when I went to work this morning. So if your stress level or your heart rate rarely comes down, and you're taking Ambien to get through the night, there's a good indication that some things could be a little out of balance in terms of work and home life.
I do know this, that one of the problems that popped up is, and I'll just say, the wife becomes jealous of the job.
Oh, yes.
In other words, the job is the mistress.
Yes. I had that problem with the mother of my kids. The ministry became my mistress. And it was a very difficult thing. And then it's not anymore, of course, but the Lord, you know, kicked that out of me. But yes, the job, and this is what I found about a wife. Women, one of the ways that women feel cherished and loved, as the Bible commands husbands to do, is that they feel like they're their husband's priority. And when a job or a sport or buddies or a bottle come in between the relationship between the husband and his wife, a godly, healthy wife is going to start reacting and doing anything she can to get that obstacle out of their way.
That's very good. Very good. All right, now, sometimes men, I've had this, experience in my life, I realized that even though I'm in ministry, it moves over into a place where it is work, and I forget that I'm serving God. In other words, that falls out. And I want to say this. I believe that the workplace is the greatest place of evangelism in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Because everybody goes to work.
Well, that's why Paul says, to leaders, pastors, elders, leaders in a church, if you cannot manage your family, how are you going to manage the church of God? That's Paul's way of saying your family is priority. Right. Get that together, and then you'll be more effective in the church.
Okay, so some guys go to work, it's a job, and they hate it.
Yeah.
And they bring that disdain home.
Right.
How do you get an attitude change? Wait a minute, maybe God is using you there. You ever thought about where you are today? God can actually use you there. How do you make that mental shift and that emotional shift in your brain?
Well, that's kind of a different subject when you talk about attitude. If that's clearly where he's placed in life, and there's no question about it, and no other open doors, he does need an attitude adjustment. He needs to go to the Lord to work that out, because the Lord can help him with that. We're supposed to work with all of our heart, but we're supposed to be content as well. Or another thing I would ask when we talk about balancing your personal and professional life is this the job for him?
Yeah.
If it's superseding his family, if it's taking priority over his family, the one thing I've learned, Perry, as a consultant and a pastor for even longer, one thing I've learned is if you put your family as priority under the Lord, He will provide for your financial needs. Mm-hmm. He just will. But a lot of guys, young men in their 30s and their 40s, they got to make a career, they got to provide. And so they're afraid to quit the job that's killing them. And when I say, look, you got to step out on this. You work on your marriage and you put your family first, and I promise God will provide for the needs of your home. I promise you. It happens every time. He did it for me.
Okay. The person that's listening to us realizes now the job is dominating.
Yes.
And there's other things suffering, relationships, home life, things like that. What would you say the first, if they're beginning to sense, all right, this is starting to hit home here, this is really poking me in the heart, what would you say to them to begin to turn around? What's the first thing they can do? Because action speaks louder than words, well, something like this.
If I was talking to a man, Gary Smalley wrote a book for men called If He Only Knew many, many years ago. And it's kind of like the wife is saying, if my husband only knew. Mm-hmm. And there's a chapter in the book that's classic when you talk about balancing your home and your life. It's titled, If Your Wife Doesn't Win First Place, You Lose. So if they're sitting in my office, it's generally because the wife has asked them to come because she's done with his schedule and his irritation. So the first thing I do is I try to get him to see, your children, your wife, are they your priorities? He would say, well, on paper, yes. And I go, well, you're going to have to translate that into a lifestyle now. So I would ask questions like his time management skill. A lot of people that put the work first or they become workaholics is they strive for approval. And what I say is if your goal is to prove something to someone or impress anyone, your identity is wrapped up in your work, and that's not healthy. You need to get focused on your family, deal with that. You need to reprioritize, get a date night going, get your calendar out. I had a pastor friend one time who was a mentor to me, and every Friday morning, he was very busy. They had 3 children, very busy man. He and his wife took their calendars to a breakfast every Friday morning. That was their day off, and they planned the week, every week of their life. Their kids were in sports, and he was busy in ministry. You have to reprioritize. I think maybe delegation. Are we talking about a personality type that nobody can do it as well as they can? Do they have to do it all because their name's on it? Well, you're going to get stressed out. You're going to be overworked eventually, so learn to delegate. Of course, delegating to the right person is critical. I think they have to decipher between what's vital and what's urgent. Those are the things I would want to know how he's managing his time at work, but to get reprioritized with his family to begin with.
All right, balancing your professional life and your personal life, I think it's a constant challenge. Again, Bill Gallagher, he's a family counselor out at Trail Christian Fellowship. He also heads up TeamWorks, and I would encourage you to check out his website and his services. There's a picture of his website on the screen there, but get a hold of him, and maybe you need some help in that area, coaching in that area, especially those who are head of organizations. The pressure's on. And that balance is a big deal. But I've always said, if your ministry doesn't work at home, don't export it.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, can I end with one thing? Do we have time?
Yeah, sure.
I have a friend who's in healthcare, and he was going to retire. He looked for his retirement his whole life. And I ran into him 2 years after his retirement. And I said, how's it going? He goes, my retirement's been miserable. I said, why? He said, my work was my life. And now that my work is gone, my life is over.
Oh, gee.
And so what he did was he started getting involved in the church, and he started volunteering for organizations. I saw him 2 years later. He goes, I'm a lot better now.
Good.
I have more interests now outside of what I used to do before.
Because he learned the secret of serving others.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, bud.
Okay. Thanks, Bert.
Thank you.